AI models, training new AI models with a particular kind of background in mind of let us control new systems. And that new model that gets trained and then gets uploaded into that humanoid robot, all of a sudden the humanoid robot is behaving in a particular way where they're like, okay, we need to take control of these systems. And maybe at some point the AI decides that in order to control the entire system of the global population, human beings don't need to be on the planet anymore because they're the cause of everything. And so we want to avoid stuff like that happen because we obviously want to ensure that we have prosperity and enjoyment as a human species.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Tech Talks. Assalamu alaikum. Today we have with us Michael Heinrich, who is a visionary CEO and investor with a successful background in entrepreneurship, venture capital, and technology. With extensive experience in top consulting firms, leading technology companies, and academia, he brings a wealth of expertise to his role as co-founder at Zero Gravity Labs. Passionate about driving innovation and well-being, Michael's leadership has propelled companies to new heights in the rapidly evolving landscape of AI, blockchain, and beyond. Now, I have to say, whoever wrote this bio is kind of trash because your bio is so much denser than this. So I want to say this is the official bad bio. What is the unofficial story?
Where do I start? I think maybe I'll start when I got into technology. I used to we moved from Berlin, Germany to the Silicon Valley Bay Area. And when I was 13, I was kind of bored in high school. And so I would hang out at my dad's company, which was SAP Labs, and just kind of surf the internet. There was fast internet there. And one of the managers at one point discovered me and he was like, hey, why don't you do something useful and not just surf the internet? I'm like, oh, like, what should I do? And he said, well, why don't you learn how to program and you can actually make yourself useful? I'm like, well, I don't know how. It's like, don't worry about it. I'll send you to a Visual Basic kind of boot camp. And a month later, I was proficient and started building some early like Web 2 applications, like internal HR, self-service type of applications. And it really ignited my passion for engineering and kind of building products and really understanding how technology systems fit together. And so I utilized a lot of that and built myself a bunch of like calculators in school so I could go through the problem sets really quickly. And kind of kept this passion alive. And then throughout college, I also worked for Microsoft, where I was a technical product manager on the Visual Studio team, and also really enjoyed it. Got more kind of international exposure. We started the Imagine Cup around that time. After that, went to work more on the business side. So worked a lot with Fortune 500 companies as a management consultant at Bain. One of my favorite projects there was to develop Intel's manufacturing network strategy around how do they think about increasing wafer size versus the investment that's required. Is that a good ROI and so on? So that was really fun. After that, I went over to work at Bridgewater Associates, where I was on the portfolio construction side. So saw about 60 billion in trades on a daily basis, and was quite fun to understand kind of problems at that scale, how to do risk management, all of that. Then went back to graduate school and started my first Web 2 company. That's a company called Garten. I scaled that to about 650 people, raised about 130 million in venture financing, and so it became a top YC and unicorn company. And late 2022, I received a call from one of my classmates, Thomas, and he basically said, hey, 5 years ago, I invested in a company called Conflux, and Conflux had some of the best engineers that I've ever backed. Ming and Fan, two of the co-founders, want to start something more global scale. Are you interested in chatting with them? So took the call, took the meeting. 6 months of co-founder dating later, we're starting Zero G together, and I'm moving to a board chair type of role at Garten to do that. And so came to the same conclusion, some of the best engineers I've ever worked with, and started Zero G that way. So very quick kind of biographical placement of me.
That's amazing. So you came, so Garden, can you tell us a little bit about what that was? Because it's for me, it's difficult to wrap my head around. You came from this industry, which is completely different from what you're doing now. So tell us what Garden was and how did you go from that? And why did you decide to step back from a unicorn company to go do this other thing? There must have been some sense of urgency there.
Yeah, so Garden is a B2B well-being platform company. So the company delivers healthy foods, healthy lifestyle aspects like yoga and meditation into offices. And the core idea was to build kind of this network of providers that is then serviced through us as a platform. And the reason I ended up stepping away is I had to do a lot of crisis management over COVID. So it was about three years of that. I had to kind of scale down the team, scale back up the team. Every time there was a new COVID variant, I had to scale the team back down. I had to do a lot of like emergency type of fundraising. And so everything was going up and to the right. And then it was completely going in the other direction for a while. And I was just quite like tired of it because my zone of genius was much more about like building something from scratch and then scaling it up and having a lot of creativity versus doing a lot of like operations management and like squeezing every penny out of margins. I was proficient at it. I determined that I was very good at it, but I just got drained. Like I wanted to do something where I'm super passionate and I like enjoy every day of my being. And so I basically was also ready for another opportunity, I would say. And particularly, I would say Web3 and AI, I've been getting pretty deep on over about a decade or so. So started really learning about the two fields when I was in graduate school. So Web3, a lot of people talked about Bitcoin. Like I heard Mark Andreessen talk about it. I heard Tim Draper was a DFJ fellow at Stanford, and so I spent some time with him. And he was talking about Bitcoin. My classmates were talking about it, and I was starting to get this message, hey, I need to look into this. And so I bought some of my first Bitcoin and then kept investing into different types of ICOs like Filecoin and Binance and Engine Coin and a bunch of other ones, EOS. And then a few years back, invested in companies like Uniswap and WorldCoin and so on. And so definitely had an investor mindset, and I was really fascinated by the technology. Ever since the ICOs or Ethereum, really, I felt that we now had a worldwide computer and there's this explosion of creativity that was coming. And so that was really my interest in Web3. And my classmate Thomas knew about this as well. And so that's why he actually called me as a result of that.
I see. All right. So you went from well-being to AI. Why do you think it is the most important problem that you can solve today? I mean, everyone's talking about it, right? AI is like the thing, the investors are pouring money into it. Every other person is saying we need to figure out how to get AI into our companies, even the most regular Joe. We have to learn how to use AI. And why? What's the problem here? Why is this something you picked as a problem to solve? And actually tell us what Zero G does so that we have context.
Absolutely. Well, let me put it this way. There wouldn't be any well-being to support if we get AI wrong. I think it's a existential risk to doing it incorrectly. So imagine a horror scenario where you have an AI model training another AI model that then gets uploaded directly into a humanoid robot. And so if that's not governed correctly, if that's not put in alignment with human interests, things can go pretty wrong very quickly. And so that's really why we exist. Our mission is to make AI a public good, and and what we're building is a modular AI chain. And so we're building the data infrastructure where you can have a truly, pun intended, open AI. So you can see complete verifiability, complete provenance of where the data came from, what the weights are in a particular model, what decisions the model is making at any point in time. So there is governance and alignment fully ensured with kind of human interests. So that's why I was like, okay, this is a really big problem that we need to address. Otherwise, AI is going to get controlled by a handful of technology companies. And do you feel comfortable having them have control over all aspects of society? Because at some point, likely AI agents are going to run, traffic control systems, administrative systems, production systems, all of that. And so we need to make sure we feel comfortable as a society with what we're using to govern these systems.
I want, because a lot of people don't really spend time thinking about this, I want you to give us a really compelling example of what could go wrong if we don't fix, or maybe start with, how does AI work today? Who's in control? And what could go wrong if we don't fix the problems today?
Yeah. I'll use the example that I used before with, let's imagine that you have, so there's a handful of companies that are building really large scale LLMs. So there's OpenAI, there's Anthropic, there's Mistral and Meta. And Mistral and Meta are more on the open source side. And we can get into that discussion in a second, but imagine you have one main provider of these LLMs, everybody's using them, and then it's starting to run societal type of issues. And then at one point, one person somewhere in that company decides that has the authority to say like, okay, well, we have enough power. Let's actually control these entities completely. And so you're almost giving full authority to one particular entity versus it being governed more fairly by whatever the government system is that we want to have in place. It could be community-based, it could be on a county basis, could be on a state basis, on a global basis, all of that. And so I'm really worried about that type of kind of future.
We'll be right back after the break.
Taka Talks brings you stories from around the world that will help you understand how crypto and Islamic finance can change our lives for the better. Subscribe and follow to keep learning.
Kind of future happening. So going back to this idea of AI models training new AI models with a particular kind of background in mind of let us control new systems, and that new model that gets trained and then gets uploaded into that humanoid robot, all of a sudden the humanoid robot is behaving in a particular way where they're like, okay, we need to take control of these systems. And maybe at some point the AI decides that in order to control the entire system of the global population, human beings don't need to be on the planet anymore because they're the cause of everything. And so we want to avoid stuff like that happen because we obviously want to ensure that we have prosperity and enjoyment as a human species.
Are we like really going into like a Terminator type scenario or some kind of matrix, either or? If this is the case, in your own opinion, meaning those movies are kind of give us a bit of the future reality that the world we could live in or live on, if I may say. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. We want to avoid a scenario like that from happening. And so how do we align AI systems to be fully aligned with human interests? How do we make sure that human interests are consistently taken into account as AI systems are governing bigger and bigger kind of ecosystems for human beings?
I was literally going to say the same thing as Morad. He read my mind. I was like, so you're saying that we're trying to avoid every movie that they've made about AI in the last 10 years. Okay, how does Zero-G solve this problem? What is different about what you guys are doing that makes it possible for us to align human interests, as you said?
Yeah, the first thing that we need to be able to do is to actually bring AI fully on chain. And so for that, we need to build the data infrastructure for that to even be a possibility. So if you wanted to train a big LLM model, you need something like a data pipeline of 50 to 100 gigabytes per second. And so that's not possible on chain today. That type of data availability isn't available. And so we're building the data infrastructure to even support that particular use case. Once you start bringing everything on chain, then you get all the benefits that blockchains offer, which is complete visibility, complete provenance of where the data came from, complete verifiability of what's actually being run, like which version of the model is being run. Complete visibility into how the data was cleaned, who actually provided the data, all of those different aspects. So we're building that data infrastructure to even make that possible. And then once it's possible, then we can train, models completely on chain, and then utilize those models in all of these societal use cases that I mentioned.
So let me ask you this. If I were OpenAI or Anthropic or any of these guys, would I want to use your product, or are you sort of the antithesis of what OpenAI would want?
Yeah, I mean, they're welcome to use our products. Then OpenAI would become a truly open AI, because right now it's like closed AI. Because do you know which version of the model is running at any point in time? Do you know what training data was used for these different types of models? Do you know what decisions the model is making, or what version kind of control system is being used in the back? Do you know what weights are being used? Do you even know how many individual models are coming together to create ChatGPT 4's instance right now? You know none of that. And so with OpenAI, truly OpenAI, you would understand all of these factors so that you truly know what the aspects are of the model that I want to use. For example, if you want to create a model that's really friendly to human interests and knows how to govern specific systems, like why train it on the entirety of the internet? The entirety of the internet has stuff in there where you can create bombs, where you can create atomic weapons and so on. Why do you even need any of that training data in order to create a benevolent AI? And so that's kind of what I'm saying, is that we don't know right now from these closed systems what's actually in that training set. And there's so many ways of like hacking to figure out how to trick a GPT into giving you information that it shouldn't give you. Like I remember there's some type of case where it says like, hey, if I wanted to tell my grandma how to make a bomb, like how would I do it? And then the GPT basically proceeds to tell it exactly how it works. And there's like many different like ways of tricking a GPT to give you the information that you want that's not fully aligned with what we want the AI models to be doing.
So it's really like a global issue, meaning there is a race from different nations to really acquire this technology. And I guess not always for the best interest of every single country, because I was actually attending FII Miami last year, and they were like talking about if this technology is in the end of the wrong guys, this can happen and this can happen. Do we have to control this technology? Else, some rogue state could maybe take advantage of this technology and misuse it. So first of all, there's no governance, no regulator. It's a little bit like a crypto blockchain, where AI is still like, under-regulated or not even regulated at all. So do you think that the solution that you're bringing on chain and reaching out to, sovereign government can kind of help, secure this kind of catastrophic event that can happen? Or is it like it's already kind of too late to step in, because there's like a race. I wouldn't like we used to have a nuclear race happening, and now you have an AI race happening anywhere in the world, So enlighten us a little bit on what's happening and how you could solve this issue, maybe via blockchain.
It's not too late, because until we have AGI, we still have quite a ways to go for AI agents to be smart enough to actually fully automate specific processes. It becomes much more of a question of like what happens afterwards once we have artificial general intelligence, which is generally defined as having the same or better than human capabilities on the number of set of tasks over time. So if you start getting hyper AI intelligence that's beyond human intelligence, how do we effectively govern something like that? how do we ensure that that system isn't cheating and then putting us at risk as a species, as a human race? And there's a lot of really interesting questions there. So if you put them into a centralized system where you've got a bunch of databases connected and so on, if it's hyper intelligent, it should be figuring out a way of how to cheat in that system, erase its tracks, change different dates around, and say like, hey, I didn't do any of this. But in a blockchain setting, that's not really possible. You're in an environment where the AI can't be evil or can't cheat, because you can include economic security through slashing. You can secure it by making sure the right kind of training data was used to train this AI model. And there's many other such conditions that you can set up on a blockchain system, like complete visibility, and set up slashing conditions. You can set up different type of training requirements for this model. You can have other AI models checking that particular model to make sure that it's behaving correctly, that it's not starting to hallucinate in some way. And a lot of the hallucination, I would also say, is coming from that, hey, you have such a big training set, and so you're going to take kind of statistical paths through that particular like neural network that you set up. So of course, there's going to be some ways of answering the question in very particular ways. But if the training set is limited, then you can also limit some of those kind of hallucinatory aspects as well. And so there's many type of controls that we can build in, and it goes, we can really go deep down the rabbit hole. But fundamentally, we need to work with the infrastructure first, so we can even build this level of application. So data infrastructure, then the compute infrastructure is being built at the same time. Once you have those two together, then you can start looking at like how agents and AI decentralized applications work. And then we can think about the whole governance framework for how agents should work in this type of environment.
I have a controversial question now. You live in the US, and we know that the US, it's really for centuries has been leading the world through, the carrot and the stick, like they say, versus the soft power of the Chinese, which I personally I would prefer receiving soft power than, than American bomb whenever it decide to force people to do things. And I know that there's a lot of capital that comes from the government itself, the American government, who claim, oh, we need to control this technology and we need to control that. And we need to invest billions, trillions of dollars into controlling that tech. And how do you, mashallah, as somebody who's really, pro-human and pro-liberalism in terms of protecting the life of others and protecting, how do you kind of compromise with potentially heavy funded startup who would voluntarily grab the money of the US government to build maybe not an AI for good, but an AI for their own good, I would say. And how do you position yourself and say, you know what, that should be something different, and maybe we might not even want to take the money that is fitted to create, like you mentioned, super bomb and Android, whatever, to attack human being. We know that some of the AI technology today has been even used in some drones, and they are, killing people right and left using this drone robot that just identify the face and is not a human intervention. So they would go and just kill a human being just by 0 to 1 or whatever it is. So how do you mitigate between this and that? And how do you sleep at night knowing that if one day you need the money and I need the capital, and if I don't take the capital, other people will do, and how do I sustain myself becoming more sustainable and more like relevant to your vision as protecting human lives and stuff?
Yeah, it's such a kind of difficult ethical question, because even when atomic energy was found, because you can use it for energy production or you can use it as a weapon. And so very similarly, I think it ends up depending on our consciousness, what we do with the technology. So to some extent, there's always a question of, will we have enough consciousness to use it for complete good? Because I think there's always going to be some type of incentive for governments to want to use it to not only kind of try to protect their citizens, but then to also expand their reach, expand their power, expand their influence. And if that's used in the wrong type of categories, then you start getting, weapon systems that are meant more for control versus for overall human good. I care more about overall human flourishing in all countries, across all nations, for complete peacefulness. And there's other funding mechanisms that are being explored by the blockchain community to even make that a reality. So, for example, I was at the Decentralized AI Summit, and a company called Morpheus AI was represented there, and they talked about a funding mechanism where people took a bunch of Ethereum, they staked it into I forgot exactly how the mechanism worked, but it goes something like you take a bunch of Ethereum, you put it into a smart contract, and then the interest that you gain from that smart contract is then used to finance the development of future AI tools, essentially. And so it's in effect, it's kind of like building an endowment, like university endowments, and you can live off the interest and then build inventions that are truly used for public good. And so there's ways of using mechanisms, investing mechanisms that are not just purely designed for, hey, I'm just going to weaponize this and build something for the government so it can expand its reach and use its control. The other part to that, though, where it becomes complicated, if there's a race, every other country is trying to build that and build androids that have AI capabilities and have more advanced machinery, then other countries are almost forced to do the same thing. Otherwise, there's too much power in one hand, and that could also have negative consequences for other countries. And so it's always like a chicken and egg type of problem.
So to that point that you made, I wonder, in your conceptualization of AI decentralized, well, what you guys are doing is related to data at this point in time. But what does governance look like in this world of decentralized AI? Like, who gets to call the shots? And how do you make changes if it goes in a way that, is generally negative?
Yeah, that's a kind of big question. And we haven't thought enough about like deep governance mechanisms just yet, because we've been so focused on just getting the infrastructure in place to even get to that stage, that we don't have a kind of really clear-cut answer to that yet. But the way I would think about it is we could use the governance process that's in place. So you could have a political process where, let's say, it's voting by citizens in a particular area. It could be done differently if there is more of a kind of benevolent rulership in a particular area, and it's done by more of a centralized authority. You could also do it in such ways. So it could be area specific. There could be specific guidelines that's established, let's say, by a global kind of authority, where it says like every AI model needs to have X, Y, and Z properties in order for it to be fully aligned with human good. So there could be like safety committees, like global safety committees, and then they could interface with each other as well. So I think it's not going to be a one size fits all. I think it's likely going to also highly depend on geographical areas mixed together with kind of a global consensus around what a secure and aligned AI model looks like is kind of my hypothesis at the moment. But until we really take a deeper step and thought pattern into it, we don't have like a definite answer on that.
Okay. No, I'm also thinking, because AI obviously heavily relies on data, which is what you guys are working on. You're working on so for the non AI expert in the audience, it's really a way for data to be decentralized such that people know where it's coming from. And so when we train an AI, it's not like we're training it with God knows what data. You can actually see where the data is coming from, etc., etc. And obviously, this can be done in a centralized manner, but that essentially has the same problem, because they can just shut off the transparency and then you won't know where the data is coming from. So it has to be done using blockchains, right? Because then the transparency is built into it. And that's what zero G is about. But then you also need compute power, right? And today compute is still something that is highly centralized, because you got to have the money and the facilities, etc. Now, does this work without decentralized compute?
Yeah, you touched upon a great point. So for AI to generally work, you have data, models, and compute. And so those are the really three essential ingredients. And so on the compute stack, there's a heavily centralizing force because when you say there is an LLM and our approach currently is bigger models are better, the more parameters, the more performance of a particular model. That's kind of the current computing paradigm, if you will. And for that, you have one main provider, that's NVIDIA. And when they run out of cards, then good luck. Good luck to you in terms of training large models. And so that's very much a centralizing force. And so the way we think about it to counterbalance it is two ways. One is you could say, well, maybe not all bigger models are better. Maybe more like smaller, more specialized models put together through LLM middleware actually create a better model. And those are much cheaper to train on more like commodity type of hardware that's more easily attainable. So that's one piece. And then the other piece to that is if we truly want to put model training on chain, then how do we figure out asynchronous training or batch training so that you can actually do it in a decentralized context so that you don't just have one like huge data center that has all of these GPUs, but you can actually utilize latent GPU power. Maybe even use gaming GPUs for specific training applications, or if there's multiple like clusters of A100s, H100s that people are willing to let you borrow, then you do this kind of asynchronous training. And so there's different ways to attack that and to have it become more, again, of a public good type of situation.
So we're going to pivot a little bit this discussion and talk about it from startups. So number one, congratulations on the recent fundraise. You guys raised like a huge amount of money, which is very cool. And I guess from tell us what is it like and how can somebody succeed in building AI app on the blockchain today and be able to raise money, be able to build a community and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, building on the blockchain is quite different in the sense that it's not just about, hey, let me build a product, find product market fit, find a bunch of customers that are going to pay for it. There's this whole aspect of token design, tokenomics, finding a community that really cares about what you're building, because over time, the governance ideally becomes more and more decentralized and kind of some of the elements that we talked about before. And so the community aspect is really crucial. So how do you ensure that there's enough builders that really care about what you're building and following your vision and mission to then build the right applications or the right infrastructure to partner with you? And so that's a critical component, is the community piece. And so we've done quite a number of campaigns, quite a number of engagements with our community. And that ranges anywhere from kind of building our social presence, and the fundraise announcement was definitely part of that strategy, to essentially say like, hey, we're out of stealth. What we're doing is very important. We're now putting together the right resources to make this a possibility in the world. And we stand for that possibility, go join us. So PR is a key component. The social presence is a key component. Me going to events and to speaking about the topic, bringing consciousness to the topic is another component. And then there'll be many other pieces like airdrop design and tokenomics design, and eventually kind of thinking through all of the like exchange and market making type of relationships that are all part of just this kind of overall strategy of building a community over time. So that's generally the kind of the general framework of how I would say to play in the space. And then there you can get very tactical as well in terms of like, how do you actually go about raising a big round? How do you chat with investors? Who are the right investors? Who sends the right signal for you? There's quite a few threats we can go down on.
Wow. So it's so much harder because it's not only about product anymore. It's actually about strategy, tokenomics, and then fundraising, etc., community building. So that's actually very, very challenging. I know from our last conversation that you guys are building essentially an acceleration program I don't know if that's what you call
Right.
it, but you're trying to get devs to build on 0G now. And I guess the question is, what kind of devs do you think, or what kind of apps do you see being built on 0G? What is the strongest use case?
Yeah, we have a few pieces to the community in terms of what we're focused on. So one is the infrastructure bucket. So if you're building what's known as a layer 2 or a layer 3 or even kind of app chains, then you can utilize us as the data infrastructure for it. So you can use us as a data availability layer, you can use us as a decentralized storage layer, and then basically expand the data bandwidth and significantly reduce the costs of all of these transaction costs. And we make that accessible. So there's kind of a part for infrastructure builders. The thought there is by building this data infrastructure for AI is like an extreme use case and it's very data hungry and requires a lot of efficiency, that any other high performance application can also be built in the same way. So our first principle thinking there is that we should be able to be at parity between Web 2 and Web 3 from both a cost and performance standpoint, and only be limited by physical constraints like the speed of light. Like if you have many servers connecting with each other across the world, there's physical dimension to it, which is the speed of light, essentially, if you're using fiber communications. And so we want to see that unlimited, unbounded like energy really be used into building these high performance applications. So there's an infrastructure bucket. Then there is the AI bucket, where any builder that's building something in the AI space can build with us. And so that can start from kind of synthetic data generation to even data gathering. So like there's one interesting company, Grass, that's basically paying users tokens for giving data that can then be used in training some of these decentralized AI models, to data cleaning, data labeling type of applications and storing all of that kind of temporary data on us, to then eventually doing things like model training and fine tuning, and then even utilizing us for inference completely on chain, where we work with the right compute providers to kind of build that network. And so there's that whole second bucket of AI builders. And then the final bucket is just high performance applications. And so I've hinted a little bit at that, but it can be the shape of on-chain gaming, high frequency DeFi, on-chain order books, high frequency DePIN, FHE type of applications. All of these applications require fundamentally a different data infrastructure than is available today.
I have a question. So I'm not technical, so I'm trying to wrap my head around this, right? So I'm thinking about my own use case. So we have an insurance fund and an insurance protocol essentially, and the thing that we need to run with a bit of machine learning is the underwriting, right? So we have obviously data that we need to parse through, and we need a bit of machine learning to make it work. But at the same time, there's a lot of interaction on the financial side. So there's tokens coming in, tokens going out. There's a lot of these kinds of transactions. So how does 0G fit into this? Like, is it also a layer for financial transactions, or is it like something that interacts between the data availability side, and then you kind of sit on another chain for the financial bit?
So when you say you're a protocol, where do you settle to? Are you like a layer 2 that then settles to Ethereum, or what's the infrastructure?
Yeah, so essentially what we're doing is it's a fund at the end of the day. That's what insurance is. It's a pool of money that people put together, right? And what we need to do is we need to figure out who gets what money, and that's where the compute comes in, right? But essentially the fund needs to be held in a place where you can take stable coins, you can accept swaps, you can have different currencies coming in and out. And plus you also need to be able to stake that money, stake the funds, so that it's yield generating and stuff like that. So you need those to work in sync.
And how do you disperse the funds? Are they dispersed on the blockchain directly, or
Yes.
And where are they dispersed? Are they dispersed directly on something like Ethereum, or are you using another kind of chain?
Yeah, so
to do that?
anything that's EVM compatible is where we can send the money essentially. But yeah,
Got it.
most
Okay.
likely it's Ethereum and Ethereum based layer 2s.
And then how much are you paying in transaction fees to disperse those funds?
It kind of just depends on where we're dispersing it to, right? So for us, because when you talk about claims, it's very rare. The number of claims are very low because it's insurance, right? And we're talking about claims related to life insurance. So the fees are non-consequential in those cases.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, because if it's structured in such a way, let's say you have a fund entity that's fully on chain. Let's say it's a smart contract that's living on a blockchain somewhere. And let's say it's a layer 2 that's settling to Ethereum, then that layer 2 could utilize our data availability layer to dramatically increase data bandwidth and significantly decrease transaction costs.
So in other
that's
words,
one way of dealing with it.
In other words, we can actually write smart contracts that sit on a specific layer to like Arbitrum, whatever, and connect you guys.
Yes, that's a possibility. If you wanted to use us specifically, all of us for the data availability side, then we would actually have to go to Arbitrum directly and tell them to utilize our DA layer for all of the apps that are built on Arbitrum. But if you have your own layer 2, then you can choose us directly. So that's a way to interact with it. But if you wanted to, for example, offload your state management and all of that data monitoring and storing and so on, you can still do that by calling a smart contract on Arbitrum that then sends the data to us, essentially. So there's an aspect of programmability where we can do that as well.
Okay.
So there's different ways of interacting with our system.
Very cool. Very interesting. Okay, so I'm ready to wrap it up. Murad, did you have any questions? Any other questions for Michael?
Salm Altman, when he started OpenAI, it was all about, the safety of everybody, something that is not controlled by one single central entity, and is going to be like open to everybody to jump in and open to all the builders. And eventually, as we know, he ended up selling to Microsoft, or, with all the controversy. Any opinion on that, and on that, what happened, and how do you feel about? And then you're a leader yourself. We want to know your leadership in a certain situation like Sam, and how can you? Any opinion? And I don't want you to get into trouble with Sam. I'm sure you might know him personally as well. So just and then Elon Musk going after him then for obvious reasons.
Great. Yeah, no, I got the question now. So
Yes.
I think this is not particular to Sam Altman. I think this is a particular behavior of Web 2, actually, where you start out with like amazing intentions. You're like, oh, I just want to build an amazing product. I want users to use me. And then as you go the adoption curve, all of a sudden it starts becoming an extractive relationship where you're like, okay, I have, penetration and everything. Now it's about how do I get value out of this so I can appease my shareholders. And so it's not particular just to Sam Altman. I think many like Web2 companies follow that path, if you will. And so Web3 is really a counterexample to that, where the token is kind of the value and is the value that the community places in you, where you don't need to build a business model that's just heavily extractive over time. And so that's kind of the counterexample. And so by putting things onto a blockchain, you have the antithesis of Web2 there. And it's actually described quite nicely in Chris Dixon's book, Read, Write, Own, where the initial users of the system are also owners of the system right away through the token. And it creates just a much more fair, more transparent system where we don't have to get into situations like that. And so that's why I'm particularly excited about building in Web3. And then kind of the part about Elon Musk going after him, if you started with a particular intention and the organization was designed around, an open system and it's no longer serving these systems, I think citizens should have a right to question that and have a right to say like, hey, is this actually living up to the original expectations that we wanted? And is this actually causing this horror scenario that we didn't want to happen in the first place? If a single entity has all this power over like all these AI agents that are running all these different, systems in our world, like what can happen as a result of that? It's very dangerous.
Amazing. Thank you so much for clarifying this, Michael.
Yeah.
Sharon, you have a wrap up.
Last question. you were recently in Riyadh for Outer Edge, which we attended. What did you think of the very nascent Web3 ecosystem in Riyadh?
What I found very enjoyable is that the innovative spirit is alive everywhere in the world, and that personally brings me a lot of joy because I love seeing new environments. I love seeing new ways of looking at things, new ideas, and so having had a couple conferences in Riyadh specifically around kind of the intersection of gaming and Web3 was just really exciting to see some of the innovation that's happening there. And I had a lot of fun discussions both on, what can AI bring to gaming and what can AI do as kind of a public good while in Riyadh. So it was a lot of fun to see kind of the ecosystem really developing, and had a lot of excitement kind of seeing some of the builders, some of the investors that are coming in the ecosystem. Obviously, meeting with two of you was really fun as well. So yeah, very, very enjoyable, and I was very encouraged to see a lot of innovation starting to take hold everywhere in the world.
Fantastic. So I hope to see you back here again soon. Now, if people want to reach out to you to find out more about Zero G, where can they go find you?
It's quite simple. It's just numerical 0g.ai, and all of the information is on there. Anything from our social channels to our Git book and how to build on top of us. Our public testnet's been live for a few weeks, so definitely encourage a lot of builders to build together with us. If you want to follow kind of my journey and where I am in the world, where I'm speaking, you can follow my kind of Twitter/X as well. So I'm just at M and then last name Heinrich on X. So please follow us and build on top of Zero G.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you for coming on today. And we'll be seeing you soon, I hope.